Es weihnachtet schon sehr hier an der Louis-Universität in Rom. Herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge unseres Videoblogs, wo Europa begann. Und wenn Sie ein regelmäßiger Zuschauer unseres Blogs sind, dann kennen Sie das hier. Wir waren nämlich kurz nach der Wahl von Donald Trump zum neuen Präsidenten der Vereinigten Staaten hier und haben hier ein Gespräch gemacht mit dem Politologen Professor Roberto D'Alimonte. Mit dem wollen wir uns jetzt nämlich hier wieder treffen und mit Ihnen über das Referendum und was das tatsächlich bedeutet, dass die Italiener mehrheitlich No gesagt haben zur Regierung Renzi, was das also bedeutet für Italien und auch für Europa. Und ich bin gespannt auf dieses Gespräch. First of all, thank you very much that you have time for us.
You're very welcome.
After this referendum, the Europeans and also the Germans are quite surprised and astonished by the Italians because from a German or even a European perspective, this no in the referendum is choosing chaos and choosing instability. Can you first of all explain to us the Italian thinking to vote for no?
Well, this is part of the politics of anger. You know, there are a lot of angry people in this country as there were in the US or there are in France and even in Germany, I think. There are a lot of angry people who vote for the alternative for Deutschland. So, angry people, why angry people? Because the economic situation is not very good. Unemployment is high, particularly youth unemployment. The statistics about the youth, the percentage of the youth voting against Renzis, against the constitutional reform, is very high. It is also high the percentage of people in the south that voted against the reform and against Renzis. That proves this factor. Then there is also the fact that the Prime Minister is not as popular as he used to be. There are a lot of people who think that he has promised too much and delivered too little. And I would say there is a third factor, which is some people were concerned about the changes of the Constitution. Some people felt that these changes were not so clear, that the rewriting of the Constitution was not well done. Others were afraid of some of the changes that were made. So the combination of these factors, the anger, the lack of popularity or the low popularity of Mr. Renzi, and the fear of these constitutional changes have combined to produce this pretty clear-cut result.
Let's first come to the reform plans. Do you agree, as some who were really worried about these changes, that this could open the door to a dictatorship?
No, absolutely. This was one of those false arguments that, now we can go into some details of that, because, you know, Italy is the only European democracy with a perfect, we say, bicameral legislature. That is, with two chambers who have the same power. We're the only one. And so, why is that? You know, why thinking of reforming the Senate, you know, should be a step towards authoritarian democracy? The other thing, for example, the other accusation, one piece of the reform was allowing the government to have a special track for the approval of his bills in Parliament. The special track would have meant that the government bills would have to be discussed and decided upon in 70 days. Is this a step towards authoritarian democracy? I mean, this is something that we find in almost every parliamentary democracy in Europe, the special position of the government in Parliament, the capacity of the government to set, to some extent, the parliamentary agenda. The real issue for many people was the electoral system, the so-called Italicum, because they were afraid, many people still are afraid, of an electoral system where people decide directly who is going to govern. How would that happen? Because, do you want me to go on?
Please, yeah.
So the Italicum is actually a simple electoral system. The basic feature of the Italicum is that if a party gets to 40% of the votes, we'll get 54% of the seats. If no party gets to 40% of the votes, the two parties with the most votes will go to a runoff, and whichever would win will get 54% of the seats. So with the runoff, voters are facing a clear choice because, like in the case of the presidential election in France, the winner is the government.
Takes it all.
It's a winner takes all, it's the government. Now, takes all means it takes 340 deputies. The majority threshold is 316, so you have to think of, there's, with 25 dissidents, the government is out. But voters have the possibility to choose the government directly. I use directly between quotes, because it's not like, in France, the presidential system. This scared a lot of people, starting with major constitutional lawyers, former members of the Constitutional Court, part of the intellectual elite of the country, the idea that was sort of plebiscitarian democracy. But this was the way that Renzis and I, because I did contribute to this, I don't know if you knew this.
No.
Maybe I should not have told you.
Now it's interesting.
But the idea was, to provide finally a system that would give stability to the executive in Italy. Because, with this system, in one house only, because the Senate would have been reformed, this is a majority assuring system. The winner gets a majority, and the winner is picked by the people. Now, the interesting thing, and now we go into details, and then I know you'll cut it as you like. This is the last step, it would have been the last step of a process of change, which we started in 1993, with the first law which introduced the direct election of mayors in Italy, and at the same time, a proportional system that would give proportional system with a bonus that would give city mayor, an absolute majority of the seats. So today, this is the way we have stabilized local governments, city governments in Italy, in a very difficult situation because of political fragmentation. Direct election of mayor with a double ballot majority system, and a proportional representation system with a bonus which gives the mayor an absolute majority in the council. 1983. 1995, we have introduced a very similar system for regional governments. So this Italicum, combined with the constitutional reform, was a way to transfer this pattern to the national level. But now, after Sunday, we'll have to wait for another
round,
another
Do you understand the fears of those who were really concerned?
No. Well, I understand because I know where they come from. They come from a proportionalist culture. Men like Zagrebelsky, former president of the Constitutional Court in Italy. This is a man who stated that stable government are a threat. That elections are not meant to choose governments. That elections are not, that you cannot speak of winners in elections, because the elections are supposed to make a picture of voters' preferences, and then it's up to Parliament to work with that picture and form a government. This is a proportionalist culture, Kelsen approach to democracy. Kelsen, not Schumpeter. Kelsen. Proportional representation, representativeness being the value to pursue, not stability. Forget stability. Representativeness.
What's from a German point of view really difficult to understand, well, not only from a German point of view, is the fact that with that culture, as you just described it, Italy is almost non-stop in a kind of crisis situation because it changes its government every 1 to 1.5 years. I mean, aren't people fed up of this?
The paradox is that when you ask people, do you like a system like that we use for the mayor? Overwhelmingly, they say they like that system. The direct election of mayors, the direct election of the president of regional governments. But then, when it comes to the Italicum, of course, on Sunday the vote was not on the Italicum, but the criticism of the constitutional reform was also, it combined with the Italicum, it combined the constitutional reform with the Italicum, you know, and people were scared by this talk of, you know, authoritarian drift because of this electoral system would give too much power to the government. But they would not understand, most people didn't understand that too much power was a power that the voter would decide upon. But this idea of a direct election, you know, was not explained, and I believe Renzis made a mistake. He tried to separate the electoral reform from the constitutional reform. And in my opinion, it was a mistake, because then he lost the opportunity to tell voters, with electoral reform, I'm giving you, voters, the power to choose the government. Where is the authoritarian drift? You will choose the government. This is what he was doing. But he by separating the two reforms, major reforms that he did, he lost the possibility to explain voters that this was a way to democratize the election, not to go the other way.
Was it a mistake from...
But this is my opinion.
Was it a mistake from Renzi to connect his personal political future with this referendum?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a major mistake. Major mistake. He could have done that only if he had been so very popular. But when he did that, he was not, he should have looked at the data. He was not, he had lost a lot of popularity. You know, if you're the leader of a party with 30% of the votes, how can you say those things? Major mistake. You know, major mistake. But I want to explain once more, and then you cut it as you like. You know, the fear of this authoritarian drift comes from the fact that this was the argument used. You know, direct election of the prime minister with the Italicum. One chamber instead of two. So the second chamber will not be able to act as a brake on the lower chamber. Plus the preferential track for government bills. The combination of these elements made some people, many people talked about it, the authoritarian drift. This is the, and people, you know, the common men and women, you know, find hard to understand, you know, the substance of these accusations, of these.
Let's talk about those who voted yet no out of anger. And let's have a glimpse on the movement Cinque Stelle, which is also, of course, known in Germany, which is seen as the big winner. First of all, is Cinque Stelle really the winner here?
No, it's the loser. Because now, without the constitutional reform, the electoral system will be changed. The Italicum is dead. In the Italicum, because of the nature of the Italicum that I explained, was the only electoral system that with whom the Cinque Stelle could have won the elections. Because in a runoff between Renzi and Di Maio, you know Di Maio, in a runoff between Renzi and Di Maio could have won. Data showed that Di Maio was competitive. Now, with the Italicum dead, because I'm sure that either it will be killed by the Constitutional Court by striking down the second round, or it will be changed in Parliament, and Renzi has already agreed before the Sunday vote to change the runoff. The Cinque Stelle will be without the only electoral system that could have brought them to power alone. That is why this is surreal. Grillo today is saying, let's not change the electoral system. This is manipulation of the electoral rules. Until yesterday, they were talking about this electoral system being one of the pieces of the authoritarian drift that we're talking about. Now they say, no, changing the system is you're thief. You're robbers of democracy. This is the new ladri di democrazia, robbers of stealers of democracy. You know, you want to manipulate the euro. But the other interesting thing is really surreal. This is only in Italy. The present situation is that the five-star movement wants to keep the electoral system, the Renzi electoral system, whereas Renzi wants to put in place the five-star movement electoral system, because the five-star movement has its own electoral system, which is a type of proportional representation similar to the Spanish system. So now the PD wants, likes the five-star movement electoral system, and he wants to adopt that. And the five-star movement wants to keep the electoral system approved by the PD.
So you understand that Germany can't understand what's going on here.
we find it difficult to understand it ourselves. I have to sit down and think about it. And I've been teaching these things for 40 years.
Let's quickly talk about the character of Cinque Stelle and maybe also about the character of Pepe Grillo. We hear today, of course, all over the world, we are discussing populist movements, and yes, everybody's, all these populist movements are thrown into the same basket, which actually is nonsense. Can you, in a nutshell, describe what Cinque Stelle as a movement really is?
It's different from any other movement in Europe because it's a catch-all movement. Now, we used to know catch-all parties, even in Germany, the CDU is a catch-all party, even more so.
Once upon a time.
Now it's catching less,
yeah,
but it used to catch more.
Yeah.
But it's still a party that catches, from the center, even the left.
Yeah.
Merkel has been very good in catching voters from the left to the right. Now
you know what many say, that the CDU is the better social democratic party than the Social Democrats.
Exactly. Now it's losing to the right,
yeah,
but still. But the five-star movement is a catch-all movement. The data are very clear on this. They get votes from the center, from the right, the center, and the left. And that makes it, and that's why with a double ballot system, the runoff, the candidate of the five-star movement will be competitive because the second preferences in the runoff, second preferences are important. The second preferences of Northern League voters and Forza Italia voters go to the candidate of the five-star, not to the candidate of the PD. Mm-hmm. And so that makes that candidate competitive. So I like to go back to a point that you made. The five-star movement is a loser in this regard of this vote. But from the point of view of Germany, Brussels, our European allies, markets, investors, the disappearance of the Italicum eliminates the risk of a victory of the five-star movement. So that political risk, which I think is the major political risk feared abroad and in Italy, in my opinion, is gone. We'll have to see now, as I say, the decision of the court and what happens in Parliament, but that risk is gone. That's why the five-star movement is a loser. Going back to your question also, it's a cross-cutting party, catch-all movement, which brings together issues of the right and issues of the left. In Parliament, they want to pass the citizenship income, you understand, the reddito di cittadinanza, a basic income for every Italian citizen, which is a typical leftist issue.
Social Democrats in Germany.
Exactly. But they vote on building new jails with the Lega Nord, mm-hmm, with the non-League. So they try to, combine left, right, and centers. But of course, on certain issues, they face problems because, for example, immigration. If they take a tough stand on immigration to please their conservative supporters, they risk alienating the leftist supporters.
Are they racist?
No. And that's a major difference with Salvini and the Lega Nord. No.
Are they? I mean, I know they say they are pro-European but anti-Euro. But how anti-European, how anti-Brussels at the end of the day is Cinque Stelle?
Well, Brussels is the establishment, and because they are an anti-establishment party. They are anti-Brussels. But even on the euro, what they say is that they will call for a referendum. So it's not, they're not going to make an outright decision in the case they would lead the government. They would call for a referendum. But they are against the euro as it is. That's the other point. The qualification, as it is. And here you can read a criticism of the austerity policy and everything else, and Schäuble in Germany and everything else.
Is this success of Pepe Grillo just, and of Cinque Stelle, just because he is, as he said now also during the campaign, because he's talking about from the guts of the people?
Yes, but he's also the voice of anger. He talks to the anger of people. We go back to what we said before about the no vote.
And what is this anger? The fact that the economy sucks, that there are not enough jobs, that the banks are falling apart. This is, in a way, a homemade problem, which is also a result, I would say, also by this system. So are people really not aware of this?
Not in the way you put it, but they are aware of these problems, and they think that this system is the cause and that the system has to be changed. And they look at the Five Star Movement as the only different party, different from the system, different from the others. And they still give credit to the Five. A very interesting phenomenon is occurring here in Rome. The Five Star Movement has been governing Rome for a few months. They've not been doing very well. They created the mass chaos because they lack experience. They don't have a network of experts that they can use. And yet, if you talk to people, and also if you look at poll data, many voters, the Five Star Movement, would still vote for the Five Star Movement in Rome because they say, they give credit. They say, yes, they're inexperienced, let's give them time. But they are the honest guy. That's the other point. The anti-system, is also has to do with the honesty. At the funeral of one of the founders, Casaleggio, a few months ago, of the Five Star Movement, the slogan was honesty, honesty, honesty. And that's another important point.
Do you consider Pepe Grillo honest in this sense?
I have to believe so. I haven't seen any charges against him, and I say that they seems to be pretty serious about, going after cases of dishonesty to a large extent. They know that this is their main capital. The fact that there are millions of Italians that think that they are the only honest segment of the political class.
So, give me a little bit of an agenda. What's going to happen now?
Okay.
How is the foreseeable future? What's the scenario?
Renzis will resign in the next few days. There will be a sort of transitional government, I believe. But the main point will be the decision of the Constitutional Court, which is due on
24th of January, 2017.
But here we have to go back to basic point of information. After the referendum on Sunday, we have a very messy situation because we have two chambers with the same power. So the government, after the election, will still need a majority in both chambers. At the same time, we have two radically different electoral systems because we have a double ballot majority system for the chamber, the Italicum, that we discussed before, and a proportional system for the Senate. These two systems will yield different electoral results. So I do not believe that the President, Mattarella, will allow for early elections or late elections or normal elections without a new electoral system that will work in both houses. So, the new electoral system could be the product of the decision by the Constitutional Court on January 24th, because the court will have to rule on the Italicum. If the court will strike down the second round of the Italicum, claiming that the runoff is not constitutional, which is a pretty dramatic decision, but if the court does that, then the two systems, the system of the House, the system of the Senate, will not be identical, but they will be similar enough that early elections will become a viable option.
Let me interrupt you here. They will not be identical. That means, from your point of view, there is no need, first of all, to formulate a new law before you can go to elections?
We could vote, maybe with some adjustments on thresholds. If you like, we can go into this detail. But we could vote, that's the point. Without the runoff, we could vote without a new electoral system approved by Parliament. In that case, we could vote, I would say, in late March, April at the earliest. But of course, the President has to agree, and there has to be a large majority in Parliament that will have to agree too.
Now, we saw a big defeat in the referendum for Renzi, but at the same time, you can also look at it and say, well, he got 40%,
right,
which is, in normal elections, very much.
13 million votes.
13 million votes. And while the others, the 60% is divided by Lega Nord, by the Cinque Stelle, by Forza Italia. Do you believe that there is enough momentum right now for Renzi to win the next elections? I mean, he has also enemies in his own party now.
It depends on what you mean by winning. Not winning, governing alone. And it will depend upon the electoral system. You know, we cannot discard this factor. It's a crucial factor. Because if the new electoral system, as I implied before, will be a proportional representation of some kind, both for the House and the Senate, the best that Renzi can hope for is to be the largest party in Parliament.
Okay, and then a coalition.
Correct. And then if you, by winning, mean coalition, yes. He will form a coalition. In my opinion, the next coalition will be Renzi-Berlusconi. And I have to tell you this, it would have been the same even if the yes would have won on Sunday. From this point of view, in my opinion, it didn't matter, because the Italicum, for the fear of the five-star movement, it would have been changed anyhow. So it will be changed now, but it would have been changed even if the yes vote would have won. So Italy's future is Renzi-Berlusconi. That is going back to February 2013, when the government was Letta-Berlusconi. And then we know what happened, because Berlusconi pulled out because of this legal problem. And then he became a Letta-Alfano and then a Renzi-Alfano. The next government is Renzi-Berlusconi.
So in other words, we're going to have done very entertaining news again from Italy.
Yes, yes, because see, Berlusconi, it's a very interesting thing also, because Berlusconi today has become a follower of de Coubertin. He has adopted an Olympic spirit. He knows that he cannot win. He will not be prime minister again in Italy, that's for sure. If that happens, I pledge to walk from Rome to Berlin.
We'll talk about that, but let's hope not. But do it in summer. In winter, it's too cold.
No, Berlusconi will not be prime minister again. But he knows that. All he cares now is to participate. That's why he has become a follower of de Coubertin. And that's why he wants a proportional system, even though he voted for the Italicum. But he voted in favor of the Italicum, which is a majority assuring system, when he thought that he could compete. Now he realized that he cannot compete. Not only cannot compete, he cannot get to the second round, because this is the issue. Now we know that the two candidates for the second round will be the candidate of the PD, Renzis, and a candidate of the Five-Star Movement, not the Berlusconi candidate. So Berlusconi wants to change that system that he has approved fully, and he wants proportional representation because he has become a follower of the Coubertin. He wants to participate. And with proportional representation, everybody gets a seat at the table. Everybody gets to participate. And he wants to participate in
except
the next
Pepe Grillo then.
Except, no, Grillo, he will not. Grillo wants to win on his own, but he kills that chance by voting no.
Now, having said all of this, discussing the political situation, we have a huge economical crisis which is going parallel.
Yes.
What does this whole situation mean for the economy here, from your point of view?
You know, we have discussed before what is going to happen if the Constitutional Court will strike down the runoff, and then that will open up the possibility for early election. What is going to happen if the Constitutional Court does not strike down the runoff? Then we will still have two radically different electoral systems, and we cannot have early elections. Then Parliament will have to approve a new electoral law, and it will take time. So there will be a new government, most likely Padoan, and the reason is the one that you mentioned, because of the fear of a deepening economic crisis and banking crisis. Padoan is trusted, is known and trusted by markets and our European partners. And I think that will be a reassuring factor, along with the presence of another Italian in Frankfurt. I don't need to.
Draghi, yeah.
I don't need to mention. So I think that Padoan-Draghi team, I think, will be able to stabilize the situation. But the banking crisis is serious, and I think, but this is not my field of expertise, I think Europe will have to come to the rescue one way or another. But it's not my field.
And Europe means Germany?
The Europeans, let's not go into this because it's not my field. I'd rather talk about things that I really know about. But it's a serious banking crisis.
But it is an important question. I think it's also a political question, because if this is going to be the case, and we have elections next year as well, then this could influence the elections in Germany as well. If Germany has again to come to rescue, let's say, the Italian banks.
Right, absolutely. But I cannot evaluate the risk because I don't know exactly I don't know the extent of the problem, and I don't know which procedures can be used. I can tell you that if the solution of the banking crisis would affect thousands of depositors or bondholders, this will spread fear and will destabilize the political situation, making the solution of the crisis worse because it would destabilize the government. But maybe this will not happen, but I don't know which way, which technical packages can be put into place to solve definitely the banking crisis. What I can tell you is that I am very upset that the banking crisis got to this point. We should have, faced and solved the banking crisis 4 years ago, 3 years ago, at the time of the Monti government, the time of the Letta government. We should not have pretended that Italian banks were better off than Spanish banks, Irish banks, and even German banks. It was a false pretense. And now we're facing a more serious issues because of the delay. This I can tell you. But how this banking crisis will be solved, I won't be able to tell you. But the economy seems to have picked up a little bit. Now we'll have to see if the uncertainty related to this referendum outcome and the evolution of the government crisis will affect the economy. But this we'll have to see in the next few months.
I hope to see you before December 2017, but it's not 2016. December, we meet again in 1 year. What will be the political situation in Italy from your, what do you foresee in 1 year?
Without early elections?
I don't know, you say.
You know, as I say, I will answer the question on January 24th, because this is really the key, because the decision of the court will set the frame for the choices that will have to be made. And until January 24th, I think we will live in a limbo. And actually, I'm sorry that the decision will be issued on January 24th. In my opinion, it should have been issued before. Because uncertainty is bad.
Do you believe that this could become now, by the court, a political rather than a legal decision?
It has always been political. Even when the court struck down the Porcellum, the so-called, you know, the Berlusconi electoral system, in December 2013, it was politically driven and not just legally driven. And it could be the case also for this decision. Striking down the runoff is not just a legal decision. I like to see the arguments, the legal arguments that will be used. Then we'll go tell the French, you know, that they're using an unconstitutional system to elect
their president.
By Italian standards, unconstitutional to elect the president next spring. Because runoff is, you know,
it's not democratic.
It's not democratic.
Thank you very, very much for this interview.
You're very welcome.
So, das war mein Interview mit Professor D'Alimonte und wie Sie ja gehört haben, am 24. Januar gibt es die nächste große wichtige Entscheidung hier dann vom Verfassungsgericht, was hier passieren wird und wie es hier weitergeht. Wir werden Sie natürlich auf dem Laufenden halten. Nächste Woche Donnerstag geht es hier wieder mit einem neuen Videoblog weiter und dann mal wieder mit etwas unterhaltsamen und nicht nur so viel ernster Politik. Tschüss, bis nächste Woche.